Your culture or your truth? That's the question we're going to explore at the top of the hour with a very special panel of guests. How does your culture help or hinder you from living an authentic life? And when you have to choose between living in your truth and living in your culture, who wins the battle? It's time for the Inner Power Hour. I'm your host, Dr. Antonia M., the Inner Power Doctor, your personal expert in business and life transformation. And this show, my friends, is about you, allowing yourself to become who you have the power to be. So grab your pens and your paper, because it's time to be enlightened, and you won't want to miss a thing. Let's get started, because it's time. It's time. Let me welcome everyone to a brand new season of the Inner Power Hour. It's going to be amazing. We're back with new energy, new life, new format, and we're back with a new producer, Danielle King, who, among other things, has produced shows for the CBS Radio Network. Welcome, Danielle.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to have you aboard.
Thank you for keeping me.
We are definitely going places, you and I. And for everyone out there, I want you to know that Danielle was part of our group that went to Peru last year. And since I've come back, something has really opened up and shifted in my life, in my space, in my energy. And Danielle being a part of this whole show and some other upcoming things is definitely related to that. So, Danielle, anything you want to share with our audience?
Well, coming off of the Peru trip, it did bring me a new scene of life and what direction I wanted to take myself in. And me and Antonia, I know that we'll make better productions, new ways of life, and new teaching. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. All right. Well, speaking of new things and shifting things and changing things, that brings me to our topic for the first half of the show. I have something called the Inner Power Challenge, which is designed to help people shift the shape of your life. And when we had our first session, one of the women mentioned that her challenge really was centered around her culture, because she was raised in such a way that the things that she wants most for herself are really difficult for her to achieve, because she comes from a culture where women are really raised to serve their husbands and serve their children. So I want to explore this idea of how the way we're raised, the way we're indoctrinated, the way we're programmed in our culture affects how authentically we live our lives, whether it's our racial culture, religious, socio-economic culture, our geographical culture, and even the unique culture we have within our specific families. How do those things affect the way we connect to ourselves and the way that we connect to each other? And that was part of the impetus of today's topic, but also a card game I created called Healing Man, Healing Woman, which was designed to stimulate fun yet transformational conversation and self-realization among and between men and women to help us expand our sense of self beyond the image that we're typically trained to see in our various cultures. So my guests today have played this game, and they've had their own battles with their culture and their truth, and we're going to talk to them about their experiences. So let me welcome and introduce these very fascinating people. First, we have Gracey Castro, who's the author of Words for the Body, Mind, and Soul at GraceyCastro.com. Welcome, Gracey, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Some of you may know Gracey because she is the star of one of my ebooks, Gracey's Story, in which she shared a very powerful and inspiring story about how she and her family were able to transform and overcome some of the greatest obstacles in their lives. and we'll hear a little bit more about that when we speak to Gracey. And we also have on the show Ingrid Moore, who's the principal of The Right Buddy. She's also a native of Trinidad and Tobago, and she's a current resident of Harlem, New York. Welcome, Ingrid, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad. We're going to have a very, very interesting discussion today. So first, Gracey, let me start with you. How do you personally feel like your culture has helped or hindered you in living an authentic life?
I've been thinking about that, and I think it's both helped and hindered. It's helped because you're raised with tremendous pride and to try to go for your goals, but at the same time it hinders you because you have some strict, antiquated rules of, what you serve, how you're supposed to be as a woman. So definitely for me, it's a 50-50.
And Ingrid, same question for you.
I agree with Gracey that it's both helped and hindered. I think for me, the positive is that I come from a island nation that's very multicultural, and so that has helped give me an expansive view of the world. But that same island nation is very patriarchal, and it affects me in direct ways in that women, as Gracey was mentioning, are conditioned to serve and to be submissive. And coming from a patriarchal hierarchy and family where my dad was absent for most of my life, and the other male figures in my family have also passed, it leaves a sort of void. So there's pros and cons to both.
So for both of you, what do you feel was maybe a specific big battle between, let's say, choosing between your culture and your truth that you recently encountered? Ingrid?
Well, ours was not necessarily, it was a very scientific and academic environment. You were taught that you would go to school, work hard, and achieve success via that path. And there were specific roles and careers that are acceptable to women that are in direct conflict to who I am as a person. I don't think that creativity is as respected as the sciences, let's say. So it's very acceptable for women to grow up to be nurses, for instance. So my return to school to pursue a degree in creative writing might be viewed as some, even family members who might think, why don't you do something more useful and go to nursing school?
Interesting.
But that's not my passion. That's not my truth.
Interesting. And Gracey, what about you?
For me, it would have to be family. At least in my family, religion is something that you're raised with, and it's their religion. And when you try to veer off, it's seen as a tremendous issue. Also, they feel that you should think about being married, being taken care of, so that someone like me who wants to do for themselves and wants to do something for myself, you have that constant battle. In most cases, you're pretty much outnumbered.
Very interesting. Since the two of you have both played with the game Healing Man, Healing Woman, and one of the concepts behind that game, as I said, was to kind of bring some of these issues to the table and examining how we live, how we use certain energies. What are some of the experiences that came up or conversations you've had based on that game with other women or with men? Gracey?
For me, I've had an interesting interaction with someone who's half my age. And we've done the cards to the point where we've challenged one another. cards, like the workbook that you did, forces you to see things about yourself that's positive or negative, and you're not going to lie to yourself. So in doing this, we've challenged each other. We have a deadline. These are the things that were negative, and we feel were a negative impact to reach our personal goals, and therefore we'll want to work through them.
Interesting. Ingrid, what about you?
Well, the cards were really instrumental and helpful in opening channels of communication for me with family members. One was an interesting experience with my sister and the cards, and her disclosure that she viewed me as a role model. That came as a bit of a surprise.
Wow.
The other was with my daughter, who I think going in has a lot of resistance to the concepts of metaphysics and our spiritual development. But it helped open our communication so that I could explore more deeply with her definitions and ideas about intimacy and authority, and I forget what some of the other issues on the cards were, but we were able to talk and share dialogue on positive and negatives, and be more accepting of each other's viewpoints, and it was great.
That's very interesting. Culture, covers many different aspects, but I think that one of the things that intrigues me most is really the culture of your particular family and how that shapes who you are. One of the first times that I played the game, one of the women who was here, she picked a card that was called Legacy. And it was really about examining the legacy you inherit from your parents and what you pass on to your children, and whether or not you consciously observe that this legacy is happening in your family, and what you're doing or not doing to repeat it. And even me, I remember one day, I don't even remember what the topic was, but it was probably something to do with relationships or something like that. And I remember learning something, and I remember thinking, I can't be the first woman who, needed to know this. Other women in my family must know this. And why aren't they sharing this information with me? It would have saved me so much time, so much trouble, so much heartache had I known. And I know that sometimes when you're young, there's just certain things you don't want to hear or don't want to listen to. But I noticed that at least in my family, there's really none of that. There's no atmosphere there of sharing and really helping someone in the family to develop and to become who they are. Do you experience that in your family, or what is your experience? Ingrid?
Well, I totally agree. It's funny that you bring it up, this concept of legacy. In talking with my sisters recently, we coined the phrase as retiring the family karma.
Oh, I like that.
There are some aspects that seem generational, some behaviors that seem generational, that because we don't share, as you said, was unknown to each of us, that, oh, you shared that belief, or you behaved that way in that situation as well. A good example is that finding out recently that all of the women in my family have an inherent fear of cats.
How odd.
We don't like cats. And when I found out that, all of my sisters feel that way, and even a cousin felt that way, and she said that she bought a cat so that she could overcome her fear. She actually got a cat and learned how to live with it and overcome the fear. And having this disclosure was amazing to me. That, wow, but we never talked about it. Similarly, in relationships and behavior patterns, because we don't share, as you said, it could have saved a lot of angst and anxiety. But I have 5 sisters, as an example, and only one is still happily and healthily married. That's another pattern or trait, or certainly worth investigation, if not retiring.
I would have to agree.
I know you have
Yes,
some
Gracey?
amazing stories, Gracey.
Well, she touched a lot of bases that I feel related to. I have 3 sisters, and one of my biggest complaints have been we don't communicate. We're taught that if you have a problem, you just put it in the back burner. You just have to get along. Everything is, no one can see what's going on, to the point where we ourselves are not seeing what's going on.
Absolutely.
And I find that each of us brings that to every relationship, even outside of family. You know, and I can take it one step further. You have one sister that has a good marriage. I don't. We've all failed on that. And the more I think about it, the more I know we all have a tremendous communication issue. And it's even something I work through every day now. There are times I catch myself saying, I'm not going to mention to this person that this is bothering me. When if I did at the start, it would solve it.
Right.
You're so right. It promotes a culture of secrecy.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
we find that we're keeping secrets from each other because we're not sharing it.
It's so interesting you bring that up, this idea of the keeping of the secrets, because in my family, I had, at one point, I was studying astrology, and I thought it would be interesting, since there were 4 generations of us still alive. My great-grandmother was still living. I thought it would be very interesting if I did a chart on me and my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother to take a look. And
Grandmother's still living?
well, she's not living now, but at the time she was alive until she was like maybe 90 or 90 something. And what a joy, you know, to have someone live that long in the family and be able to access those old family stories. Because in order for me to do the chart, I had to talk to everyone. Well, when were you born and where were you born? And that's when I started to get these family histories. And a lot of people didn't want to talk to me. They didn't want to tell me certain things. And so that was one part of it. And then the other part of it was, in doing the chart and finally hearing these stories, I started to uncover these patterns that were between me, my mother, her mother. And one of the patterns, and I was the one who broke the pattern, or I should say my mother was the one who broke the pattern. None of them were raised by their mothers, except me. And I thought that was so interesting. And all these other little patterns that started to come out. But a lot of that came from the fact that so much wasn't shared in our family. And I started to then go to my father's side and ask questions. There are so many of us that have so much in common that could have helped each other with different aspects of our lives. If only we knew. If only we shared. I didn't realize that there were so many people on my father's side of the family that had the same type of career ambitions. They were into spirituality and healing and starting organizations and things like that. I'm like, well, that's what I wanted to do. I had no idea that that energy was present. And one of the things that I learned during meditation was that when you, metaphysically speaking, if you look at a family, on the outside we just see these different individuals in the family. But one of the things that I learned is that the family is kind of like one energy, and that energy evolves through the people in the family. And the more that we're able to connect with each other, the more we're able to connect with ourselves and raise that whole energy up for everybody in the family. You know, and that was actually also one of the reasons I wanted to do that card deck. And I'm really excited about the fact that people are using that in their family situation to have different kind of discussions, new discussions that they never have, you know.
I like it.
Yeah, me too.
Very interesting approach.
Yeah. So Gracey, what were some of the transformations that you experienced in your family?
Well, I guess one of the greatest one is I had to outsource a role model in order to bring it back into it. In order to change something, you have to learn what the better change would be. And you can't find that if everyone's tight-lipped. So it took learning how to go out there and find a better role model and open up my own communication to then teach that through. You know, for example, talking with my mom is very difficult because she's very, very tight-lipped. So the times that I can get her to talk, it's not by my wanting it so much as my learning how to.
Interesting.
I think the cards in itself has helped me by reminding me you don't need just one role model. You can have a few.
That's true. As a matter of fact, you remind me, Ingrid, when we went to that New Year's Eve party, or that New Year's Day party, and played the game, most of us in the room were, well, at least for me and you, we didn't know most of the people in that room. And we were playing the game, and each person picked a card and they shared their experience. But what I really was touched by was at the end, after everyone had gone around, each person shared either what they were going to do to help develop the energy that their card indicated, or they asked for help. And there was one woman, I can't remember her name, but she had shared that she recognized how critical she was as a mother or grandmother, and how her children and her grandchildren had now embodied that characteristic, and they were always so critical of each other, and she wanted help from the group in trying to come up with ways to change that behavior within herself. And I just thought it was so fascinating to see these men and women sitting in a circle talking about that and sharing their advice and their expertise, and their experiences.
I agree. I thought what was really fascinating about that whole experience was, as you said, we didn't know most of the people there, but each person shared so honestly, so from the gut, and there was no sense of vulnerability or fear. Everyone just put their deepest feelings out on the open, out on the table. And it encouraged the next person to do the same, and so on, until the whole room was filled with such emotion. It was a great experience.
It really was.
It sounds wonderful.
Oh, it really was. I think that was the biggest group that I've been present at where the cards were used, and it was really tremendous to see that. And the very first time that I played the game, it was a small group of us, and there was one man and 4 women in the group. And what was so interesting was that afterwards, like the next day, one of the women called me, and she's telling me how the male friend that she brought to the group, she'd never seen him like that. Ingrid, kind of what you were just describing, that he was so open, so willing to be vulnerable. And this is a friend she's known a good long time. And even with the woman we were just talking about, the person who was hosting the party, that was a woman she'd known for a long time. And here these people both are sharing things that they've never shared before, you know, and I thought that was just so incredible. And when she described to me how he usually is, they were like two different people. It's like while he was playing that game, he had transformed into this whole different person. So there's something about that game that people seem to let their guard down and are willing to, you know, step into that new energy. So thank you both. We're at the end of our segment. It was great to speak with you. We had Gracey Castro, author of Words for the Body, Mind, and Soul at GraceyCastro.com, and Ingrid Moore, principal of The Right Buddy at TheRightBuddy.com. Thank you both for joining, and I hope you guys will be back for future episodes of the show.
Enjoy learning, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You can get the Healing Man, Healing Woman card game from our website at www.innerpowerdoctor.com. Coming up next on part 2 of the Inner Power Hour season premiere, Shifting the Shape of Your Life. How can you attract, create, and master what you want most in your life and live your ultimate dream? Stay tuned. You've been listening to the Inner Power Hour with yours truly, Dr. Antonia M., the Inner Power Doctor, your personal expert in business and life transformation. If you're ready to transform what you've learned today into action that will change your life or your business, then get the support and tools you need now on my website at www.innerpowerdoctor.com.